You and your colleagues may say 2.25 trillion is a starting point, but this needs to be a bigger bill. This needs to get larger.
Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez went on MSNBC to critique Joe Biden's infrastructure plan. Now, before I get to these clips, including what progressives in the House may actually be able to do with their power to improve this plan, I first want to show you how the media so far has been portraying this infrastructure bill. So ABC News here with the headline, Biden unveils sweeping infrastructure plan, calling it a once-in-a-generation investment in America. CNN here, even better, with the headline, with an eye on history, Biden moves on big, bold, and progressive infrastructure package. Many of them in the media comparing him to FDR here, which is comical. Let me get to the first clip here. AOC breaks down exactly what is wrong with this infrastructure package.
First of all, this is 2.25 trillion over 8 years. For context, because these huge numbers are hard to understand, for context, we passed an almost $2 trillion COVID relief package that's supposed to last us 1 year, with some provisions lasting up to 2 years. So the $1,400 stimulus checks, that big package that we felt in our lives, were deployed on a shorter timeline. So I think that if we need to really have some shorter timelines, some urgency, greater urgency in this package. And I think that some of these investments need to be greater. So for example, let's take public housing. This plan, this Build Back Better plan, it advocates for a total national investment of $40 billion in public housing nationwide. Sounds great, right? Except when you consider the fact that the New York City public housing system needs $40 billion alone just to get up to code. During the wintertime, people run out of heat. They don't have hot water. They don't have electricity sometimes. There are holes in people's walls. The New York City Public Housing Authority needs $40 billion alone just so that its residents can live in dignified housing, because they've been underinvested in and starved, frankly, by Republican Congresses and administrations for so long. So for us to actually invest in national public housing infrastructure, we need to do way more in order for us to deliver on this promise in terms of a price tag there.
So AOC here is, of course, exactly correct. But the next question is, what will she and other progressives in the House actually do about it? So the second clip will deal with that. I'll get to that in a second. First here, the biggest giveaway for how tiny this infrastructure package is to just do what AOC brought up. Look at the COVID relief bill that just passed. $1.9 trillion, essentially administered over a year, 2 years for some provisions. That's essentially $2 trillion for a year. This infrastructure bill is $2.25 trillion over 8 years. Clearly, that's inadequate. Just giving you a bird's eye view here of what's in this package so far. You have research and development, manufacturing, focus on clean energy and reducing emissions, invest in more inclusive science/tech workforce, the care economy, invest in home and community-based care for seniors and people with disabilities, improve benefits, working conditions for caretakers, the at-home infrastructure, build and renovate affordable housing for low and middle income buyers, ramp up broadband access, infrastructure, revamp highways, roads and bridges, modernize transit systems, airport terminals. So there is some good in here, of course, but it's the lack of investment that really is troubling. And if you want a larger breakdown, the Washington Post has it. This is a graph based on that data. So I'll link to this below the video as well, so you can quickly read through this to give you a little more specifics about what's in the package. But just some reactions here before I get to the second clip. Mehdi Hassan here tweeting out, the Biden infrastructure plan is historic and unprecedented, a much needed investment in the country. The Biden infrastructure plan doesn't meet the scale of the economic, environmental, and public health challenges this country faces. Both of these statements can be true. He's right here. So because of the total lack of investment in infrastructure over the last several decades, it may appear to some that this plan is historic and unprecedented. But when you actually look at what is needed right now, it is woefully inadequate. So this is why you're seeing these two versions of or these two reactions to the infrastructure bill right now, because some people are thinking in very short term. Others are looking at what is actually needed and understanding that this infrastructure package does not go far enough. Ralph Nader here saying Biden's touted 2.3 trillion infrastructure over 8 years is trivial. It comes down to less than $300 billion a year for a $21 trillion economy. Even refused to take the corporate tax rate back to 35% as under Obama. Just proposed 28%. Democrats going small again. This also, entire tweet's a great point, but this specifically right here. Joe Biden is only proposing, first of all, this bill or this package really shouldn't be tied to taxes, because again, it gives the impression that you need, governments don't work the way that, you know, your household income works. That's not how. I don't have to go through a whole, discussion on MMT, but look up MMT to understand how governments actually spend when they control their own currency. You don't need taxes to pay for the investment. But that said, if you're going to move the tax rate, the corporate tax rate, why not bring it back to where it was under Obama? 28% is absurd. So it shows you how every time conservatives move the goalposts, Democrats may come in and it may seem like change and improvement, but they don't move the goalposts back to where they were before. So essentially, over the course of history, especially over the last 30 years, you are moving further and further and further to the right every time. Because even if a Democratic president comes in and makes some changes, it never goes back to where it was originally. So you're always chasing the carrot, and you never actually get back to where it was. So more here. Critics warn Biden infrastructure plan falls woefully short on climate crisis. So this is a big, one of the big criticisms of this plan. And Pramila Jayapal here saying, quote, "We believe that our country is ready for an even bolder, more comprehensive and integrated plan that demonstrates the size, scope, and speed required to aggressively slash carbon pollution and avoid climate catastrophe, create millions of good family-sustaining union jobs, improve Americans' health and safety, reduce racial, gender disparities, and curb income inequality by making the wealthy and large corporations finally pay their fair share in taxes." And tweeted out here, "Now is the time to go big." So here's the thing. Pramila Jayapal, AOC, I think 20 others are members of the Progressive Caucus in the House. It is more of a revamped Progressive Caucus, so it is actually supposed to be a real Progressive Caucus this time as opposed to in the past. But talk is cheap. What can they actually do? So this question was brought up by Rachel Maddow, and let's see how AOC responded.
Sounds to me, from what I hear you saying tonight, that on this one, what may happen is that President Biden may say, listen, today in Pittsburgh, I want $2.25 trillion over 8 years. But when it lands in the House, you and your colleagues may say $2.25 trillion is a starting point, but this needs to be a bigger bill. This needs to get larger before the Senate even gets a look at it. Is it fair to expect that that may be the way this goes?
Absolutely. If we could wave a magic wand and the progressives in the House were able to name any number and get it through, which obviously isn't the case. But if we're looking at ideals and what we think is the actual investment that can create tens of millions of good union jobs in this country, that can shore up our healthcare, our infrastructure, our housing, and doing it in a way that draws down our carbon emissions to help us get in line with the IPCC standards, we're talking about realistically $10 trillion over 10 years.
10 trillion over 10 years. I think that makes a lot more sense than 2.25 trillion over 8 years. Now, the question is, what will they do to push it to that? Will they try to get 10 trillion over 10 years? In that answer, it already looked like that AOC was trying to give themselves sort of an out here, saying that, if we had a magic wand, this is what we would do. But they do sort of have a magic wand. They have this Progressive Caucus where if they don't sign on to a bill in the House, it's not going to pass the House. So if they vote as a bloc against this infrastructure package because it's not enough, then Democrats in the House would be forced to improve the infrastructure package. They could have used the same power with the COVID relief bill, where if they withheld their vote in the House because the minimum wage increase was taken out of it, they could have used their power to put that increase back in the bill. Now, ultimately, they did not do that. The most charitable reason, I think, is because they understood the need to get COVID relief to people immediately and didn't want to have this prolonged fight over it. So they just went along with taking it out. But now you have an infrastructure package. There isn't the same urgency that the COVID relief bill had. They can use their power now to withhold their vote unless this infrastructure package is improved. You have to be willing to use your power the same way that so-called moderates like Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema use their power to strip down these bills. You have to be able to use your power to build these bills back up to a place where they're acceptable. Will they do it? I don't know. But they are clearly aware of how inadequate this bill is, or this package is. Jayapal, AOC, others making it fully aware of how inadequate the package is. So let's see if they use their power to actually build the bill back up to a place where it is acceptable.